to Joplin, already 50 people who have gone, but there are amazing people up and down the aisles that you may not know how God has used them. And this morning we have a special guest, Todd Baker. Todd, are you in the house? Where did Todd go? Todd's around here, I hope. Todd, he's supposed to be here. Where is Todd? There he comes. He's out there. He's coming, Todd. Wake up, Todd. You're out there.
Fighting a baby out there.
Special guest, and here he's not even in the room. Todd, what's going on with you? Well, this is Todd Baker. You may not know him, but Todd is trapped now because he can't get out from over there. Okay, there he comes.
That's skinny, all right. No problem.
Hey, all right, you're
I
okay?
can make it.
Okay, you're out there.
I'm fighting the 6-week-old out there, but I won.
You what now?
I'm fighting the 6-week-old out there, but I won.
Oh, okay, all right. This is Todd Baker. He's got a couple of kiddos, Avery and Harrison. That's one of the ones you were dealing with? All right, and then Laura is his wife. And Todd's been here about 2 years. And you may not know him, but Todd is the co-medical director for the emergency room at Skaggs Hospital here in town. But before he did that, Todd served in our military as a major, and he was the chief ER surgeon in the emergency room at Baghdad, Iraq. And I've asked him, since it's Memorial Day, to share some of his experiences with us today. And so, Todd, please do that.
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate the chance to talk to you guys. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my story, but I always, whenever I think about it and I mention it, my story really isn't about me. You know, I was in a building somewhere. I wasn't one of the guys that was in a Humvee Striker out on the street on foot patrol. You know, I was safe. And so this story is not about me, but from Arkansas, went to medical school in Little Rock, did my emergency medicine training down at Fort Hood, Texas, the same place where they had the shooting a couple years ago. Actually, a couple of my buddies were on duty that day in the ER and used the same techniques that they had used with me in Baghdad there at Fort Hood for a little mass cow situation there and save lives that way. And I found myself at Fort Lewis, Washington, up in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, when my time to deploy came up. And it's all totally random as an emergency physician. I may have gone out to the desert somewhere and sat and played video games and lifted weights and done nothing for 15 months. And you can look at me and tell I didn't lift many weights, so I was a little busier than that. But I just happened, you know, I don't think random chance, but by the Army's random chance, I happened to be assigned to go to Baghdad. And at the time, it was the busiest combat hospital in the world. And it's there in the green zone, affectionately known, the emergency department of that hospital is known as Baghdad ER. And so that's where I found out I was going, and moved Laura and my 5-month-old daughter at the time back to Searcy, Arkansas. Took off on September 30th, 2007. I drove to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where about 350 of us met up there to get ready to deploy with the 86th Combat Support Hospital. So our team, we were going to be the ER. It's like a full hospital, and we were going to take over for the 28th Cache, which had been there for 15 months. And this was about midway through the troop surge of 2007. And so we all met up and started getting to know each other. We had 3 docs. I was the ranking guy, so it automatically made me in charge, although I may not have been the best doc. But it was my show to run. I had 9 nurses, 4 of which had never worked in an emergency department, essentially were brand new straight out of school. And I had 16 medics, 2 of which had ever done trauma. And here we're going to Baghdad to the heart of the action. So we get to know each other a little bit. We go to the range, spent most of our time at the range, actually, doing PowerPoint presentations on legal stuff and all kinds of stuff like that. Absolutely no time for medical training. Our days were 18, 19 hours long. No training, no finding out, is this medic good at this, or is this nurse good at that? And fly over to Kuwait, get in Kuwait, spend a few days there, once again. Roll over, Humvee train, all kinds of crazy stuff, but no time for medical training. So we load up on C-130s, and we head to Baghdad, November 1st, 2007. I remember I had never flown in a C-130, which when you see the TV shows, you know, the Army guys and all that stuff flying on them, there's, you know, like 8 of them in the back of them, all spread out and enjoying their flight and everything. Not real world. Real world is 54 jump seats and 54 bodies in those jump seats with all your gear, all your stuff, crammed in there. There's no windows. Now, the Air Force guys are hanging in their hammocks off the back and having a good time, but for those of you who are those of us who are the cargo, it was not as fun of a ride, and your whole goal is not to be the first one to puke. That's the goal, is don't want to be first, all right? But we land at Baghdad Airport about 3 a.m., And it's a safe airport. You know, they're not worried about, you know, it's secure. There's always the threat of mortars or rockets coming in, so there's no lights. It's all dark. There's, you know, 5 or 6 planes, all hot loading with the engines running. That's how we get off and everything. And then there's, over here, there's helicopters, 8 or 10 helicopters all running. Everything keeps moving because you got to keep moving because you don't want to be setting targets. You know, the aircraft don't want to be hit. And so they get us off and they take us through. We check our IDs into country. And then we go and we get in a quick formation. And the crew chief of the Chinooks, who we're going to fly to the green zone in, the crew chief, you can't hear anything because it's just deafening with all the rotors going. But you can just see his lips moving in the moonlight. You just follow the person in front of you. So there we go. We load up on Chinooks. And so I'm in the big twin bird Chinooks. And I walk up the ramp, and there's a 50 cal machine gun on the back of it. And I'm thinking, you know, I've flown in these before back home, but they weren't armed. You know, it's like, okay, there's something different here. You know, this is the war zone now. So we take off, and, you know, there's no lights. You know, all the crew is using their night vision gear. And, you know, obviously we don't have that stuff, so we're just kind of looking around. And they leave the back ramp open, and the crew chief gets on the 50 cal and mans the 50 cal. And we're flying, and then the moon is to my background. I'm out back towards the ramp, and I can see the other bird that's with us silhouetted against the moon in the backdrop of the crew chief on the 50 cal. And I'm thinking, okay, we're here now. You know, this is it. We've made it. This is the war zone flying over Baghdad. We actually landed at the Cross Sabres, which is now you've seen that on TV. It's Saddam's big Cross Sabres. It's now a landing strip for us, essentially, for helicopters. And we get to the hospital. Now, the crew we're replacing has been there 15 months throughout the troop surge. Okay, so they're pretty good. We get there, and we overlap for about 7 days. On day 1, keep in mind, I don't know these guys. They don't know me. No one really knows anything that's going on. And the very first patient that we're going to watch them work on so we can try to learn and figure out what to do is a 19-year-old soldier who was defusing a bomb and had both her arms blown off. She's got burns all over her face, both her arms blown off, and they bring her in, they lay her on bed 1. Of course, all of us, our eyes are this big around, and we're looking, and that crew that was there, they worked it just like this. Not a word said. She was intubated, put on a ventilator, had a large bore IV, had 6 units of blood, and was off to the operating room in 12 minutes. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. UAMS down in Little Rock, St. John's, Cox, amazing trauma centers. I'd go to there in a heartbeat if I was traumatized for any reason, but nobody can do that. Nobody does that. And we're looking at each other like, what's your name? You're my medic. Can you do an IV? You know, and I mean, this is where we're at. You know, can we do that? And these guys are leaving in a few days, and it's us. You know, and we're the busiest combat hospital in the world, and these soldiers are going to be coming to us essentially in 5 more days, and we're not going to have any help. We're not going to have anybody that's been there to watch us. So the 3 docs and the head nurse and I got together and said, okay, guys, crash course here. You know, even as, you know, I was an emergency trained doc, I don't see amputations, blast injuries, you know, gunshot wounds every now and then, but nothing like this. And so we said, okay, even though the only patients we saw in the emergency department there were truly sick, like chance of dying, you know, the ones that weren't trauma were like chest pain, heart attacks, or really bad asthma, or whatever else. If you weren't going to die, you got sent to the clinic. We didn't see you and take up our ER beds. 100% of our patients are medics that day. We said, okay, we want 2 really big IVs, put them on the monitor, get them on oxygen, and if they don't get all their clothes off fast enough, you cut their uniforms and everything off them as fast as you can. And so we just put that into our 18-year-old kids, our medics' heads, that whether the patient has no legs, whether they have a gunshot wound to the chest, or whether they have an asthma attack or appendicitis, I don't care. I don't want you thinking. I don't want these kids having to think, well, what do I do in this case or what do I do in that case? They do the same thing every time. I actually got in trouble with the command. My commander came to me, he's like, Todd, you can't be cutting the clothes off all these people. They don't need you. And I'm like, sir, you know, lives depend on it. I'm sorry, but we got to do this, you know. And so anyway, so within 3 weeks, we became a team. Our nurses, when we knew that birds were coming, 95% of our patients came by air. When we knew birds were coming, they'd have all the medicines taped to their chest, pre-syringe, pre-ready to go. They'd walk in the room. Todd, I'm pushing this. They wouldn't even ask me. They'd just tell me, I'm pushing this. Tell me when you're ready for that. And within about 3 weeks to 6 weeks, 10, 15 minutes, these people are going to the operating room. I mean, absolutely has nothing to do with me. This is the system we fell into, the system that was in place. In our trauma room, everything was open and ready to go. If you try to put somebody on a ventilator in an American hospital, it takes a few minutes because you have to go and it's all sterile and you have to do this and you have to call these people from upstairs to come and do the area and all these kinds of things. Over there, you didn't have time for that. You had 3 minutes or that soldier's dead. And so it was all pre-open. I would turn around, grab a tube, and shove it in. It was that fast. There's no worrying about infection. There's no nothing. You just got to get that stuff in. You got to get that blood into them and keep them alive. And by the time we were done, we had a 96% American soldier survival rate by the time we got out of there. But that, and sure, that's great and wonderful and all, but the things I learned while I was there, I mean, yeah, we were a team. We were a family. You know, I love those, my other docs, those nurses, those medics, we're still family. We're still friends. We still stay in touch. But look at what these guys on the street did. You know, I was safe. I was in a building. These guys would go, their convoys would be hit, and keep in mind, EFPs, or you might have heard, there's a certain type of IED that are actually made out of country and shipped in. Now they're in Afghanistan. It was mostly all Iraq. Now they're in Afghanistan. But they'll slice right through a tank. We have nothing that stops them. Nothing. And yet these guys go on patrol every day. These guys go on foot patrol every day. No one. Today may be the day. You know, just like Neil was saying earlier, this may be it. And you know, that's Memorial Day to me. These young soldiers are my heroes. And I had one guy, patient I'll never forget, 100% burns to his entire body, had no eyelids, had no eyelash, had nothing left. And he had made it out. His vehicle had been hit, and he made it out, and he went back in to save his buddies and got fuel splashed on him. Another guy that was trying to pull his buddy out of a Humvee that had been hit. You keep all the ammo in your body armor, and it was so hot in there, his ammo starts cooking off on his chest as he's trying to pull his buddy out of the vehicle. And yet these guys, they do that. If they don't, if they're not physically hurt, if this guy that's trying to pull his buddy out doesn't get him out and he's not hurt, he's back on patrol the next day. And he does it. And he does it. And that's Memorial Day, and that's what, those are the people that make us free. And those are the people that give us the opportunity to do the things that we do. And last thing, I also noticed bad guys. I'd been in the Army 6 years. I mean, we're America. I know we're not mean to the bad guys. It's not what the news shows you, but I knew we didn't do bad things. They cut off our head when they catch us. I mean, we don't do bad things. But I was there, the first week I was there, our guys were in firefights with the bad guys, neutralizing them, and then flying them into us in the middle of all the melee, flying them into us as fast as I can, doing CPR on them, trying their best to keep them alive. Lots of times I would just have to look at them, and just due to the resources of the nation, you have to just let them die, and so I'd make that decision, we'd just have to let them die. But our guys on the streets, that's what they did. And that was the bad guy. It's just, I had no idea. Even being a major at the time, and all the time I'd spent in the military, I had no idea that that's how hard our military, our 18-year-old, 20, 22-year-old kids on the streets work to save lives, regardless of what side they're on. And those are my heroes. That's what means a lot to me.
Todd, you're an Arkansas boy like I am, and so you think of a veteran being some old, grizzled-up guy that's, you said cranky in the first service. I didn't say that. That was somebody else said that. That wasn't me. That's Todd saying that. But your heroes, you've just said that, are these young men. And now when you think of a veteran and a hero, Todd's 36 years old and serving our country, and yet you're not the first to come along and do this, are you?
Not at all.
How does that make you think about veterans now after having served and seeing what many have gone through?
Well, and like I say, I use the word cranky because when I was a kid and going through the typical teenage years, I didn't understand why, it wasn't, these little things were a big deal to me. And then there'd be this old guy who was a Vietnam vet that would, try to put a different perspective on it. And I didn't listen to him, come on, you don't know anything. You know that I need this bike, not that bike. And this is what matters because I don't have that bike, and it just had no idea. And now they're not cranky old men. Now they're 22-year-old kids, and like I was saying, I'm a cranky old man compared to these young guys that are out on the streets, I mean, these are kids that are coming back.
So through your experience there, what do you see the benefit of going there? I mean, regardless of politics, we're not going to get off on politics today of whether we should or whether we should not, but your experience there, what do you see happening on the ground among the Iraqi people and what it means to be there?
Well, for the Iraqis I dealt with, and I dealt with a lot, half of our patients were Iraqi, and for the ones that I dealt with, they were very happy we were there. Now, they don't want us there 20 years from now, don't get me wrong, but they want to be safe, and they want to be free. And they are learning through, how many hundreds or thousands of years of Middle East dictatorships, and they're learning that, wow, I can be free. And no, it's not easy. And look at how long it took. It took us, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War. I mean, it took us a long time to get this democracy thing figured out and freedom figured out. But it's a natural. I believe God gave everybody, regardless of where you're from, the desire to be free. And I think it starts. I think the idea has started in Iraq. As far as what's going on throughout the Middle East now. It'll take 50 years. There's going to be car bombings, and there's going to be some bad guys coming to power out of all. But I think all the stuff you're seeing in the world environment today is coming from Iraq. People realizing, wow, there is an alternative. And I really saw, especially later in my tour, Iraqi soldiers standing up and Iraqi police officers standing up to the bad guys. And keep in mind, most of the bad guys weren't Iraqis. They were from other countries. There are guys that had been shipped in there to do bad things, and they really, really stood up. I remember, I didn't mention this first service, but I remember American First Sergeant, a Iraqi police station had been overrun. And the media always shows, well, we're always out fighting, the Iraqis are running the other way. And yeah, I'm sure that happened some, and it may have happened a lot at the beginning. But an American First Sergeant came in as we were retreating. It was mostly Iraqi National Police that were wounded and blown up, and he was going to each one of them saying, you fought hard beside my boys. I'm proud of you. And he's saying that through the translator, I'm proud of going to each one of these Iraqi police officers who were dying for their country.
So really, when we grill our hamburger tomorrow or our hot dog, there's really a little more to it than that, isn't there?
Absolutely, a lot more to it.
Not just what's going on now, but what has gone on in the past. And so we recognize that sacrifice is what makes it. You said earlier in the first service, freedom is not free. There is a great cost to us being able to enjoy the freedom of worship, the freedom of gathering. And while we want to especially thank those who are serving now, we also want to thank those of you who have served in the past. So if you have served in our military in any capacity, peacetime or wartime, we'd love for you to stand up with the Air Force, Army, Marines, Navy, Coast Guard, so we can honor you right now. Would you stand if you served our country? We thank you. We thank you for your sacrifice and service to our country. Todd, tell us when you came to know Christ, who brings the ultimate freedom. When did you begin to know Christ?
I was 18 years old. I came from a divorce, home of divorce, and I wasn't on my own, so it wasn't a bad situation, but I kind of took care of myself, lived with my dad, and I was an angry teenager, just like going through those years of trying to soul search and figure out what's right and what's wrong and what's going on in the world. And my brother-in-law is a Baptist minister now down in Lafayette, Louisiana, and he was patient with me, and he was calm with me, and he led me to the Lord when I was 18, and I've been walking with Jesus since.
Amen. How many of you feel better about going to Skaggs now up in the emergency room? Anybody feel better? Yeah, I feel a lot better too. Would you thank Todd one more time for being here? Todd, thank you for your service.
Appreciate it,
brother. I appreciate it. Yeah. Pretty amazing stories, and at the end of the service, Todd's going to be in the foyer, and he has written a book about his experience. Let me tell you, it is not a G-rated book. It is not a PG book. It is a book of what happened there, and so please use every caution if you want to read about that. And it is not a Christian book. There's no music at the end where everybody gets saved and everything is happy. It is the story of what has happened. But I think it's an important and valuable story, and Todd will be out there and would love to talk with you veterans as well. Todd says some things that I think are pretty important for us just to reemphasize. Sacrifice is a sacrifice. It costs. And you may not see the result of that sacrifice in 10 minutes. You and I live in a microwave world, don't we? We just throw something in there, push the button, in a minute 45, we think it's supposed to be done. It doesn't work like that. It takes a long time. And yet, once a sacrifice is made, in the long term, something amazing happens. I mean, how many of you would have ever thought that Germany and Japan would be some of our strongest allies? And so there is incredible sacrifice that is made, and there's also a sacrifice that Christ made as well. He was about to go to the cross, And he said this to the disciples gathered around him. My prayer, he's talking to the Father with his disciples around him, my prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who believe in me through their message. Now you think about the sacrifice that Christ was about to make on the cross. And his disciples are looking at him saying, this makes absolutely no sense. You shouldn't do this. This is not going to work. And Jesus says, I am doing this not just for you guys, but those who follow me. As a nation, we get the benefit of those who've served before. And the ones that are serving now are giving benefit to those that will come in the future. And you and I have been given life by Christ to serve him and live for him in these days. And the sacrifices that we make today may mean the difference in someone else's life in the future. It is so easy to be self-consumed, where all we are is consuming the resources. Kendra and I are doing a little home makeover project, and we have been working the long hours trying to make sure that this stain matches this stain. Do you know what I'm talking about? I mean, if you've redone a home in the 1970s, you're trying to remake it so this matches this. And Friday, all I did was remove people's stuff out of their house and moved stained piece of furniture after furniture that's just worth nothing now. I'm picking up a little Shamu doll that was important to somebody in that house at some point, and I'm just pitching it over to the side. If we consume everything for ourselves, our freedoms, our time, our energy, and we do not pass on to those who follow us, shame on us. May we live lives of self-sacrifice and service, not just for ourselves, but for those who will follow us, just as Christ's prayer was not for them alone, but for all those who believe in me through their message. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? I don't know how today has hit you, but I know it's been impactful for me. For many of us, we look forward to Memorial Day weekend and an extra day off. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm glad we have that. But there is so much more to remember than just grilling a hamburger or a brat on the grill this weekend. We need to remember the sacrifice that our veterans have made so that we might have freedom, where they had to go over the ocean to attack and defend against enemies so that you and I might be able to gather here in freedom. And the same sacrifice is being made by today's generation of young men and women to try to find peace through freedom throughout the world. And you and I get the benefit of those things, and we have the opportunity to freely tell people about Jesus and to be a location that can send people into the world to tell others about the great hope, the great ultimate freedom that comes not through a political power or through military force, but the freedom that comes from a soul set free from sin. May we live all of our lives, not for ourselves, but for others, just as Jesus did. Whether it's serving in Joplin or whether it's loving a person down the street, our calling is to be different and to live differently. And maybe today you need to make a decision to do just that. Maybe you need to repent for the very first time to come to a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, so that when you die, you will not spend eternity in hell, but that you would go to God in heaven. Maybe you're like I am sometimes, and we're just caught up in serving ourselves. We need to repent of that Western American self-consuming lifestyle and live differently. Maybe God's got something else on your heart. But as we close our time together this morning in prayer, and then I'll ask you to stand and sing in just a moment, I'll ask that all of us might remember the sacrifice of those who've gone before us in our military, but those believers who have gone before us to make sure that we have heard the gospel and that we might do the same by living well. Father, we thank you for the sacrifice that your Son made to get